In today's video, we're going to be discussing the best Mirandus Exemplar team compositions and which exemplars would be best for certain scenarios. We're going to cover two scenarios today. The first one is going to be fighting bosses, and the second will be exploration. But before we get too far into the video, I first wanted to take a second and introduce myself. So if you haven't met me yet, my name is Jake and I make content all about Mirandus. So if that's something you're interested in, then hit the subscribe button and I'd love to see you stay a while. If not, then I guess thanks for clicking on the video. But without further ado, let's get into the content. I first want to start this off by saying this is all very highly speculative. We don't have a whole lot of information on the party system inside of Mirandus, but we do have confirmation saying that there will be a party system of some sort. So now that that's past us, let's first talk about the best boss fighting team in the game. I'm going to break this down into the best typical DPS role, tank role, healer role, and support/utility role. Let's talk about the best DPS in the game. I truly believe that the best DPS will either come from the Everflow elf or the All-Sight elf. And here's my reasoning for this. The Everflow elf has a bonus to casting speed, so that means that he'll be able to cast spells quicker than any other character in the entire game. And then the All-Sight elf has a bonus to ranged weapons. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a bonus to, say, shooting speed or damage or I don't know, but regardless, any sort of ranged weapon bonus could be very, very, very helpful as far as DPS output. Now, which one would take the cake for number one could definitely depend on the boss and its resistance, because if you've played any other games, a lot of times monsters have specific resistances. So one could be resistant to magic, whereas another one could be resistant to ranged weapons. So that really could change who takes number one. In my opinion, third place goes to the Earthlight elf. But this one's hard because I could also totally see Earthlight being number one in certain scenarios as well, because the Earthlight has a reduction to energy cost when casting spells, so it has more sustained energy throughout the entire fight. So I could see how a long boss fight, how an Earthlight elf could be really, really helpful because they'd be able to output more spells over a longer period of time. But this really depends on the casting mechanics inside of the game and how the energy system works as well. Are we going to be running out of energy all the time? If that's the case, then yeah, Earthlight would probably take the cake for number one. Now, in my opinion, number four would have to go to the Dark Sun elf. And this one is where it gets kind of fun. This is where we get kind of creative thinking about it. I thought about the Dark Sun elf a lot, and why would seeing outside at night be an elf ability? Because an elf is the most expensive exemplar. And yeah, it's cool because Mirandus is going to be super dark and all, but there's not very many scenarios where I could see where a Dark Sun would beat someone with a higher DPS output. But here's what I was thinking. If a Dark Sun doesn't have to carry a lantern and it can use two hands, whereas any other elf would have to carry some sort of light and only be able to use one hand, maybe the Dark Sun elf will be able to two-hand a weapon that another exemplar would only be able to use one hand. So if that's the case, maybe they could use some sort of two-handed staff and cast stronger abilities or something like that. I don't know. Again, this is pretty speculative, but that's kind of where I was thinking that could be beneficial, especially if you're by yourself. Now that doesn't have anything to do with the team composition, but if you're by yourself, a Dark Sun elf could be very, very helpful. So that pretty well sums up the best DPSs in the game as far as my opinion is concerned. Next, let's cover the best tank in the game. Now this one gets kind of fun. So the best tank, in my opinion, I actually don't even think this is my opinion, I think this is how it's meant to be, is the Bright Sun elf. And that's because the Bright Sun elf can literally turn light into health if it's outside during the daytime. If those two conditions are met, I really truly believe that it's meant to be kind of OP. However, if the scenario is that you're either underground or it's dark outside, then that Bright Sun elf can't convert the sunlight into energy. Maybe some other character is able to cast some sort of light spell that allows the Bright Sun to use that as health, but again, that's pretty speculative. If that's the case, then the Bright Sun, I think, takes second for the best tank in the game, and the Bone Orc takes number one. The reason I think that the Bone Orc would make a really good tank is because it's resistant to bleeding and heals very quickly. So that's obviously a very tanky ability. So between those two, I really think that they will kind of take the cake for the best tanks in the game. Now, there could be maybe some sort of magic ability that allows one of the Everflow or the Earthlight Elves to be some sort of tank, but the Bright Sun and the Bone Orc were literally made to be tanks. Let's talk about the best healer in the game. This one is where it gets extremely speculative because we don't know anything about healing inside the game. I don't know if it's via potions, if it's via spells. We don't know how you heal. But assuming that healing is coming from a magical ability, then either the Earthlight Elf or the Everflow Elf would be the best healers, because you either have a reduction to casting speed or a reduction to energy cost when casting a spell. And I think that the Earthlight, the reduction to energy cost, would probably be the better healer because there's more sustained healing over time rather than quick bursts of energy and then running out of energy. Other than those two, I don't really know if there are any other healer type characters within the game. Maybe if the Bright Sun Elf could throw some of his health at somebody else, that would make the perfect healer, but we don't know if he could do that. Now, I know what you're thinking, enough about elves, and I completely agree, so let's talk about some of the lesser rare characters that I think would make perfect utility and support roles in boss fights. So the first one would be a cartographer, and the reason I say cartographer for a boss fight is so that you can map out your way to the boss fight. Not necessarily like during the boss fight, because he would just be another character, but as far as getting to and from the boss fight, if you die, when you die, you're going to need to know how to get back there. So with that NFT map, you'll be able to get there again. Or you can even sell that map to somebody else who's trying to find the boss so that they can beat the boss. Arguably more important than the cartographer would be the conveyor dwarf, because the conveyor dwarf adds extra storage spots to your team. Now, since these items are on chain, these loot drops are on chain, you don't want to leave things behind. You don't want to leave behind $5, $10, $15, $50 swords, because you can actually take those back into a town and sell those. So you're literally leaving behind money. So having a conveyor dwarf would be really handy, being able to add those extra, few items to bring back to sell. Third place has to go to one of these scouting orcs. I would either have to say the Orc of Certainty, which can sense aggressive creatures, or the Orc of the Beating Heart, which can see heat signatures. So you can see how scouting the boss could be very helpful before you actually engage in the boss fight. That way you can kind of see what his status is, if he's by a bunch of minions, if he's kind of off by himself, and you can get more knowledge on him before you just Leroy Jenkins your way in there and die. I do have some honorable mentions that I want to throw out there that I think could be really, really helpful to a team, but they didn't make the top few exemplars. So in my opinion, the Mumsens and the Neverlook halflings would both be really helpful, because the Mumsens move in almost complete silence, and then the Neverlooks, when crouched, are almost invisible. So you can see how having some stealth on the team could be really beneficial, especially sneaking past monsters. But those are more for solo ventures rather than a team composition. And that pretty well sums up, in my opinion, the best team or the best exemplars to have for boss fights. Now, let's cover some exploration. And there's a couple different types of exploration. We can talk about land exploration or sea exploration. Really, the main thing that would change between those two would be a seafarer. If you're exploring the sea, I think that you're going to almost need a seafarer, but I don't really know why. So it's been confirmed that you won't be able to drive a boat. I'm assuming that the seafarer will either reduce time on the boat or maybe help you to access certain locations that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So that one could be a necessity if you're going over water. But obviously, if you're exploring over land, you don't need a seafarer. So I would keep the tank, the DPS, and the healers all the same, but I would definitely change the utility classes. So the first one that I think would be important the first and second, honestly, they stay the same. I would still keep the cartographer and keep the conveyor. The third one, though, I think would be a Glimmering Clan dwarf, because if you're out exploring, maybe you're in a new area that you haven't been before or no one else has been before, so there could be some rare gems or rare ores that a hollower could pick up rather than the Glimmering Clan. So those two are two that I would take on a land exploration team, or even a sea exploration team as well, because if you're far away from home, there could be rare jewels or ores that you don't get to see in your area that would sell for a lot more. That doesn't go to say that it nullifies having a scout. I still think having a scout would be important, but I think that having those two dwarves would probably be more beneficial for making money than the scouts would be. Though I could play devil's advocate and say if you didn't have the scouts and you ran into a bunch of monsters and your team died because you didn't have a scout, then that was probably a poor decision to not have a scout. One exemplar that I wanted to mention before the video ended is the alchemist. So a lot of people think that having an alchemist, they will be able to craft potions on the fly. But McCarthy said in Discord that you need to be, I believe he said that you need to be at a potion stand or in some sort of town or something like that to craft the potions. I don't think that you'll be able to craft the potions on the fly. I hope that I'm wrong about that, because I think that would be super helpful. But so alchemists, if they could craft on the fly, they would definitely make both the boss team and the exploration team, but I don't think that they'll be able to do that. So that's why I did not include that one. That's why I didn't include the alchemist on either of the team. Regardless, if you've made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you watching. And if I've missed one that you think belongs on either of the lists, then comment down below and let me know which one, because this is all speculation and I'm probably 100% wrong on every bit of everything that I said. But it's fun to talk about and fun to discuss anyway. So if you got something from this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like it, because these videos take a surprisingly long time to make. This one, actually, I had made the entire video the day before, and then I accidentally deleted the whole thing. So this is the second time I've recorded this one. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. Peace, guys.